All right.
Okay. Yeah.
We'd like to reconvene the Budget Committee and invite Sheriff Roberts up to present with the County Sheriff's Office.
Martha's.
And just like to remind the committee members to have their mics on during their comments and questions. And for logistics purposes, I'd just like to say we'll have the Sheriff's Office do their presentation and then have Community Corrections do, Chris, go ahead and do their presentation, and then we'll have Q&A after that. And we'd like to give you about half our time for your presentation and half the time for questions and answers if that's okay. Give you about an hour to present, and then we'll get in our Q&A or so.
Paul had, he's going to be a little late, but wanted to assure you that he supported everything you were delivering today.
Perfect.
Commissioner,
Did not hear him say that.
I'm sure Commissioner Schrader shares the same sentiment.
Whoa, wait till he watches that video.
All right. Okay. So thank you. Go turn the mic over to.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and Commissioners, Budget Committee. First, I'd like to introduce a few individuals here with me today to help answer questions. As you've mentioned, I'd also like to publicly thank our staff, who's really worked incredibly hard to put things together to get to this point here today. So, seated to my left is Under Sheriff Matt Ellington. Off to my right is Chief Deputy Chris Hoy, and then to his right is our Finance Manager Nancy Artman. In the back, if you could just raise your hand as I call out your name, as our Patrol Captain James Rhodes is here, Services Captain Kevin Poppin, we have Detective Captain Jeff Smith, our Jail Captain Lee Eby is here, our Community Corrections Captain Jenna Morrison is here, and our Civil Captain Dave O'Shaughnessy, and we also invited Deputy Shellens, who's in charge of our fleet, to be here today to make sure that we had everybody here to answer questions, that we could do our very best to help facilitate this process. I just wanted to give you some quick highlights, and the members of this organization really have accomplished some amazing things this past year, and I wanted to just kind of put things in a little bit of perspective. So this past year, our SWAT and hostage negotiation team actually deployed 23 times in 2016 and worked extremely hard to resolve some of the most dangerous situations peacefully. Just to put that in context, there are 32 members of our SWAT team, 13 members of the hostage negotiation team. And while SWAT is an interagency team, the majority of the staff on SWAT are actually from the Sheriff's Office. We also have a 18-person team from the jail called RRT, which is a rapid response team used for crowd control incidents. This past year, they responded to Lake Oswego, to another situation on McLaughlin, and then 4 or 5 times to actually assist in Portland. Our drug task force, for example, is an amazing partnership, again, with city, state, and federal partners. There's about 20 people on our task force. Again, the majority of those task force members come from the Sheriff's Office. We've actually earned some national recognition for the effectiveness of our drug task force impacting drug trafficking organizations, which are identified as really being successful on the federal level of our impact. In fact, the U.S. Attorney referred to us as being the gold standard for working Lynn bias cases. And those are the cases where individuals responsible for supplying drugs that eventually led to an overdose death were brought to justice. I can't tell you, I was back in D.C. and a lot of folks on the East Coast, when I brought up Lynn bias cases, they actually didn't even know what they were. So for us in the country, I do believe we are leading that edge. In 2016, we actually responded to 13 overdose deaths. They were able to bring 6 of those cases forward for prosecution with a total of 27 defendants. To give you an idea on the seizures we had this last year, we're really having some record amounts of seizures. We had 5 pounds of cocaine, 39 pounds of heroin, 169 pounds of meth. There were several other drugs with a total street value of $3.1 million. What's also incredible along that way is the team made 210 arrests, seized 45 firearms. They opened 6 new drug trafficking organization cases and dismantled 1 drug trafficking organization this past year. Shifting gears, just talking about our jail, which I am very proud of as well, is really an incredible organization over there. They book more than 16,000 people into our jail. That's 43 people per day. While we book 43 individuals a day, I'm always amazed at the number of contacts that medical staff at our jail make. Last year, there were 71,000 medical contacts, which works out to be 191 medical contacts per day. We actually had 13 inmates this past year in 2016 receive their GED, which we're very excited about. We believe that education is a foundation for transitioning folks into not committing crime. This year, we've already had 17 receive their GEDs, and we're contributing a lot of that to our transition center, which has also made a big difference. Shifting to the kind of the patrol front, in 2016, we responded to 71,000 911 calls. Not only that, but they conducted 74,000 self-initiated activities, and that includes things such as stopping impaired drivers, serving arrest warrants, enforcing traffic laws, and many other things. But you combine the calls for service, those 911 calls, and the self-initiated activities, that works out to 16 calls per hour, 24 hours a day. Just to mention some other major crimes that we respond to, detectives responded to 7 homicides last year, and a typical call out takes 15 to 20 detectives. Along with, we bring reconstruction experts, CSI, and a number of other folks on each and every one of those. As you know, we had a tragic situation in Colton recently on a homicide, and that just takes a huge team to respond. Much of you're going to hear me say is completely on overtime. Talking about car crashes, we responded to 16 fatal car crashes, really just since July. The reconstruction team is called out on those as well. And I just know just recently in the last couple of weeks, we had 2 fatals in one day. So the craft reconstruction team is extremely busy on their efforts. I know we're going to talk about this later, but a Family Justice Center, which is called A Safe Place, is our domestic violence unit, which has a number of outside partners that provides wraparound services to really do our best to protect victims of family violence. I must say that, and you'll hear from Angie, I believe, later, is just that that program really is saving lives and making an incredible difference. In 2016, the Family Justice Center had 4,000 visits that came into the Family Justice Center. So community is absolutely using that facility a lot. They also helped obtain over 750 protective orders since we actually began the video court program in 2014. Lieutenant Angie Brandenburg is the director of the Family Justice Center. I want you to know she is a very busy young lady, and she also heads up our National Family Violence Warrant Sweep, where we partner with agencies across the United States to really enforce crimes against families, children. Last year, we had 45 states participate, all coordinated by Angie, 441 agencies. They made 6,000 attempts and made 1,200 arrests in one single day. Actually, since that program began, they've now had over 70,000 attempts and over 14,000 arrests. Another very busy unit, we're always talking about overtime and the things that face us. Our search and rescue and marine unit is very busy. We recently had a drowning at High Rocks that you probably saw on the news, but that search and rescue and marine unit responds about every 3 to 4 days on a search and rescue or major mission. Switching gears to community corrections, really some exciting things are happening in community corrections, particularly in our CSAP program, which is our drug and alcohol treatment program. We constantly get visits from around the state to come check out our program because it is so successful. We had 76 CSAP graduates. Out of that, we also had 123 clients receive employment going through our program. So housing, jobs, addressing addiction issues, and mental health issues, those are the things that we really believe are the foundation for impacting recidivism. But on top of that, through community corrections, they also gave back over 40,000 hours of community service into our community. The Transition Center, which has been open just a little over a year, has actually provided services to over 1,100 individuals. And these are just a few areas that I've highlighted to mention. I obviously can't go into all of them, but I did want to mention just a couple other things before we kind of shift to getting into the whole numbers, and that is we do have so many functions at the Sheriff's Office: records, property crimes, crime prevention, our internet crimes, IT, and others, and they are all absolutely critical functions of the Sheriff's Office. But I wanted to talk about a few accomplishments just for a moment, and that is this past year, we received our re-accreditation with Oregon Accreditation Alliance, and this ensures we meet the best practices in policies and procedures. This may sound like an easy task, and I want to tell you and guarantee you that, however, this took actually years for us to accomplish. It was a complete rewrite of our policies and procedures, reviewed by county council, the union attorneys, our attorneys, and many others. This also included making facility changes to come into compliance with best practices, and looking at a statewide level where we're at as compared to other people in the state. There's only 8 sheriffs in the entire state of Oregon that are accredited out of 36. Now, talking about police departments, out of the entire state of Oregon, there's only 33 police departments that are accredited out of 139. And the reason is because it is extremely hard to get to that point. But not only that, to ensure that we continue to have the best practices and policies in place, we have a full-time policy analyst that also works with our attorney to make sure we're following legislative changes, looking at national best practices, and trying to stay ahead of the curve on policies that need to be implemented or changed. Not only do we meet Oregon accreditation standards, but we just had our jail inspected, meet Oregon jail standards guidelines. This is a complete review of our jail policies and practices, and we were absolutely in complete compliance. Furthermore, in this past year, we had an independent medical audit of our jail and was reported to have an exceptional health care at our facility, and received very positive feedback on our mental health care and our START program, which Chris is going to talk about a little bit later. But I want to highlight that we continue to challenge ourselves to look for cost savings and ways to improve the efficiency of our organization. First and foremost, I believe it is vitally important. You'll see it on the slide up there. It is working together to make a difference. And our partnership with Rich Swift with H3S has been key. Having mental health workers work with our patrol division day to day to help reduce those repeat calls for service is making a huge impact in the community. Our partnership with Christina McMahon with Juvenile Department, we've been working very closely with schools to improve ways that we can help keep our kids safe in schools. We also have great partnerships with the United States Marshals Fugitive Task Force. We have a person on the task force. They help serve our arrest warrants. We have somebody on the terrorism task force, which is really becoming a concern locally here in the United States. We also have a member on the FBI's RCFL task force. I want to tell you what that is, and that is a computer forensic task force. We assign them there. They also get a higher level of training. They also process our computers and have an entire team that can work on helping us address that issue. But in regards to some cost saving, we made some changes within the radio system for our detectives. Ended up saving about $165,000 on that one change. Our Deputy Shellens from Fleet could talk more about that, but which is a huge benefit. Other significant changes that you'll probably want to ask us more about today is the disincorporation of Damascus. That was a reduction of 4 positions. While the calls for service continue, the impact will be a delay in response for calls for service. And just its top priorities we look at is continue really to be the same. Our 2 top priorities continue to be able to hire the 6 deputies for the jail so that we can open those closed 26 jail beds that have been closed really for budget shortfalls in the past. Our next priority continues to be that of which the Blue Ribbon Committee, previous grand juries have all stated, is that we do need a new jail is a priority for us. But I guess before I turn it over to Chief Deputy Chris Hoy, I just want to remind everybody that our staff really do put their lives on the line each and every day. And you don't always hear about it, but I can just tell you that an example of what we had this past year was Deputy Cordova, who was immediately attacked, responding on what would appear to be a simple auto pedestrian car accident, was shot and nearly lost his life in really trying to render aid on a situation that appeared not to be that threatening. So at this time, I want to turn it over to Chris Hoy, who's going to go through some things, and hopefully as we're moving along, we're answering those questions for you. Chris?
Thanks, Sheriff. I'm going to start with the Administration Division. If I'm not sure. Oh, we have the clicker. You got it? So the Administration Division, the total budget is $4.5 million, most of which comes from general fund support. the major accomplishment for this past year, like the sheriff had mentioned, is getting reaccredited through the Oregon Accreditation Alliance. We can move on to the civil division. Sorry. So the civil division, those are the folks provide courthouse security, sort of civil process. That total division budget is $3.9 million. If some of you may recall that during the recession, we had a significant amount of sheriff sales that we accumulated. We were sometimes we had over 400 pending sales. I'm very pleased to announce that through Captain O'Shaughnessy and his staff and their hard work, we have no backlog at this time. We're 100% caught up on all those sales. We're able to process them as they come through. As the new ones coming in have certainly slowed down finally, but that took us several years to get that backlog taken care of, and so happy to announce that we're all caught up on that. And if you want me to go into any more detail on any of these slides, I don't feel like you probably want me to read every one of them to you. So you can see there what we have for personnel costs and carryover and that sort of thing. And with that, we'll move over to the jail. The total division budget for the jail is $29 million. The accomplishment that I'd really like to highlight, as the sheriff had mentioned, is our START team, and it stands for Stabilization, Treatment, Assessment, and Reintegration. And that's a group that it's a multidisciplinary team that comes together to look at inmates who are exhibiting significant mental illness. And so we have folks there from H3S, from the courts, from community corrections, jail staff, Horizon, from all over. The DA's office often sends a representative, the defense bar, and we try to start planning for better outcomes for those folks who are in our jail who have mental illness. We're trying to come up with a plan so they don't languish in the facility, and so we can create a better outcome when they do get released. And that's been a model that a lot of people have wanted to try to replicate. So that's been a great program. I'd encourage you to come take a look at that at some point if you get a chance. As the sheriff mentioned, the policy level proposal from last year, we did not get funded, but that one still hangs out there with the 26 empty beds and the 6 deputy positions, which would provide those for opening of those medical beds if we were able to fund that at some point. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Under Sheriff Ellington to carry on from here.
Thank you. So the investigations division is our detectives and our drug task force, as well as the Family Justice Center. Total budget there is just short of $11 million. As the sheriff mentioned, the statistics on the Family Justice Center are impressive, as well as the drug task force. If you want to switch slides. Fund balance, we do have some restricted forfeiture fund balance of just under $800,000. The patrol division, total budget's $35 million. That includes the revenue from the Enhanced Law Enforcement District, the levy, and then our marine revenue from the Oregon State Marine Board. As you can see there, that we have about $6.9 million in police service contracts from the city of Wilsonville and Happy Valley. And we also get about $1.4 million from TriMet for folks that are assigned there. We're still happy with our results from the Neighborhood Livability Project. That's a good partnership with code enforcement and others from the county. And we're particularly pleased with our partnership, as the sheriff explained, with Rich Swift and H3S and the Behavioral Health Unit. We have 3 folks assigned to patrol now, and we anticipate expanding that by 3 more in the future. Talks about fund balance. We did lose 4 FTE with the disincorporation of the city of Damascus. Support Services Division budget is just over $8 million. That includes our IT departments, our Public Safety Training Center, records. Gets about 5.7 in general fund support. Under other sources of revenue, you'll see special permits. That's a lot of the CHL permits that we issue through the training center. And at the bottom, you'll see that we, in calendar year 2016, we hired 24 employees, but we did have 23 leave employment. We completed 95 backgrounds that took an average of 49.2 days. And again, that talks about fund balance. And I'll turn it back over to Nancy to talk about office-wide sheriff's office budget stuff.
Good afternoon. As you can see on the slide, the Sheriff's Office Department budget is $92 million. As Mr. Krupp mentioned yesterday, this next fiscal year 17-18, we'll be combining the Sheriff's Operation Fund with the Levy Fund. They will both still be independently tracked, and the funds will remain distinct, but it'll provide better options for managing the funds as opposed to having to journal entry money back and forth. So we're looking forward to that opportunity. As you can see, our general fund support is over $57 million. That is nearly 63% of our budget. I'm sorry, bear with me, I'm turning pages and doing the clicker. Thank you. Multitasking. Other major revenue sources for the Sheriff's Office include taxes from the levy, which we anticipate to be $11.5 million in the coming year. Local government revenue, as the Undersheriff mentioned, the bulk of this is from contracts with the city of Wilsonville and Happy Valley for police services. And other revenue sources, this includes pretty much any miscellaneous revenue that comes into the Sheriff's Office. Conversely, our expenditure categories, as you can see, are mainly personnel. That accounts for about 76% of our entire budget. Professional services is another one of our large expenditure categories. That would include items such as our contract for CCOM and for jail medical services. And finally, cost allocations, which are approximately 4% of our overall budget. These next slides demonstrate projects that have been on facilities books and are at various stages of completion. If you have questions about them, we'll entertain them and try to answer them as best as possible, but these are more for your reference. So this particular slide demonstrates the Family Justice Center projects. That was a total project budget of $82,021, of which $44,000 remains. Next is the Public Safety Training Center. That was a total project budget of $443,000, of which $409,000 remains. The next slide is the Brooks Building. It was a total project budget of $408,000 with $260,000 remaining. The jail facilities capital projects have been to replace the heating and air conditioning units and the roof. As you can see, both of those projects are completed. And our property facility, construction of that facility has been completed, and the Sheriff's Office is now at full use of the facility and are quite enjoying having the capacity to appropriately store material, have the space that has been desperately needed. That project, again, has been completed and the building is occupied. Financial trends remain similar to what we've brought before you the last several fiscal years. Were we to be completely staffed, we would have a very difficult time maintaining basic operational needs. And this is a result of revenue not keeping pace. So approximately 70% of our budget for staff is covered from general fund support. The rest of it comes from other sources, which are dwindling, mainly grants and grant revenue and grant opportunities that are going away because every agency is feeling the same constraints with monies being made available. Additionally, our materials and services budget increases about 5% per year. This is contract costs, this is costs to uniform deputies, this is anything that you can imagine from our pens and papers. So that trend continues, and that's something that, as Mr. Krupp mentioned yesterday, we're going to continue to look at 5-year projections and determine what this looks like going out into the several next fiscal years. In the expenditure category, we've really been hit in personnel costs. And as you can see on the slide, We are going to sustain about a $1.5 million increase between this fiscal year and next fiscal year for the costs of benefits for staff. And again, we anticipate PERS increases over the next 2 biennia to increase between 19 and 21%. It'll have a significant impact upon not only our budget, but the county as well. Moving on to FTE, we had 449.35 FTE during this current fiscal year. As the Sheriff and Chief Deputy mentioned, with the City of Damascus Police Services contract going away next year, we will be down 4 FTE. The ELED, the Enhanced Law Enforcement District, has had healthy and sustained revenue and has allowed for us to add 1 deputy position this coming year. So it's a net loss of 3 positions. Next, I'd like to discuss with you our recent policy level proposals and what the results of those funding have meant to the Sheriff's Office and to the county. The first is an addition of a Domestic Violence Enhanced Response Team Sergeant. This position was filled during this fiscal year, and in addition to managing the day-to-day work of the divert unit, the sergeant also has accomplished regular review of all domestic violence-related patrol reports, and this is to assign cases either for follow-up or any corrective action is needed. There has been wonderful collaboration with the District Attorney's Office in an effort to hold offenders accountable. And just to give you a sense of the number of reports that are being processed, in calendar year 2016 alone, Divert processed over 600 patrol reports, and that allowed the Family Justice Center, a safe place, to determine which cases had the highest risk for injury or lethality, and they were able to respond accordingly. The next policy level proposal was for jail security cameras. Those were installed. They are in place in catwalks and other areas that were determined to be at risk areas or necessary for safety and security. By installing these cameras, it now allows for the Sheriff's Office to be further in compliance with the Prison Rape Elimination Act, or PREA, as you may be aware of it. So that is the end of our formal presentation. We are happy to entertain follow-up questions or other questions you may have at this time.
I think at this time we'll open it up to questions then. And I think Commissioner Humberson was first, then Tom, and then Commissioner Savas. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I only have 2 questions. Is the department considering expanding the ELED to increase services to Damascus?
You know, we have discussed that and had discussions with Don Krupp about that. You know, I think the first steps needs to really partner with Don and his staff. One of the things we recommend is doing a citizen survey of that area to see the direction and service level that they would like. So, you know, one of the things I would recommend is Don maybe delegating somebody from his staff, somebody from our staff, work together to look at whether or not that's the appropriate direction. But I think first and foremost, want to hear from the citizens of Damascus. Do they want additional services? As you know, there's been a lot of controversial issues in that area, and we want to make sure we're meeting the need of the citizens. As I did mention, you know, we're still responding to that area. But geographically, I think you've also seen the district, so the response time, you know, most likely will drop. And but good question.
And my only other question is, it's a kind of a gross income and expenditure question, and I think I know the answer, but I want to be sure. You're showing your overall operating revenue at $89,345,556 and a $92 million in change. It's about a $3 million difference between income and expenditure. How are you covering that difference?
I'm going to let Nancy.
Commissioner, if I may, that is the sum of revenue that does not take into account carryover funds, which are approximately $3 million. So
Okay. Thank you very much.
you're welcome.
Thank you. Tom, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sheriff, we talked in the hallway briefly about the sheriff's office and performance clackamas. So we know that the community corrections portion of your budget has gone through that process. So where are you in terms of your willingness to have the rest of the sheriff's office go through that process?
Absolutely, great question. And as we first looked at performance clackamas, one of the things that we wanted to do was take kind of a smaller department, which was community corrections, and involve that. And to be honest with you, after we went through it, I sat down with Chris and said, "What did you think about it? Did you think it was a benefit?" And he said, "Absolutely." So we're all on board for moving forward with performance clackamas. I think that there might be a little bit of a staffing issue
I understood that too.
outside that, but we're ready to move forward on that. We're constantly, I think it's very important to partner with the county and see how we can look at our efficiencies and do that. So all in favor of it.
Okay, thank you. I have a follow-up question on the ELED, because I was going to ask you that as well. One of our questions that we sent to you guys, I don't know if you got it, was what is the timeline of if the polling results, I hope you poll the people in the current ELED if you're looking at the merger as well. What's the timeline for getting that done? And you don't need to answer it today, but I mean, it's going to take a while to get it on the ballot, I understand. And so it'd be nice to see that.
Yes, and I think, we don't have any money budgeted to do that survey and some of those things, some of the staff, and that's where if there's within county admin to take a look at that financing avenue, that I think it'd be a partnership, obviously, with Dawn and I working together on that. I'm always a big fan of sooner the better, but it also kind of looking at staff caseload and what's going
Well, if it's a ballot measure too, there's state election law considerations about use of public resources. A question on the 5-year projection, and I guess my first question is probably for Nancy, what did you have to do to balance this year's budget within available allocations? And was there anything that impacted service level?
We were able to maintain current service level. There are areas in which we would like to enhance service that we haven't had the opportunities to do so. One of the things that the sheriff prides our office upon is being able to stay in the forefront. So we want to be out there and be proactive and be progressive, and the funds are keeping us and inhibiting us from doing so. We went through the budget and were able to make a few cuts here and there where needed. But when all was said and done, with some vacancies that remained unfilled, we were able to submit a balanced budget. Also, there are some expenses that we won't realize this year. For instance, we're not holding the Search and Rescue Conference, so that is a bit of expense, although they do generate their own revenue as well. So there were some efficiencies that we looked at that we tried to either eliminate or reduce cost. So we're really working with a very, very lean budget. And looking forward to the next 5 years, we will be working with county administration and with you all to determine which priorities we can start to incorporate into the budget. As Chief Deputy Hoy mentioned, one of the unmet needs is opening those 26 jail beds and getting the funding for the deputies. So at this point in time, we're able to maintain critical basic service level and nothing more.
Okay. And a related question, have you had the opportunity to update your 5-year plan, or is that something you'll be doing soon?
At this time, I have not. I've been focusing on preparing for the budget deliberations.
sense.
But it certainly will be a priority once we get into the fiscal
Okay,
year.
because when you get that done, I think we'd be interested to know what the magnitude of the gap would be
Certainly,
for next year and then in the future years.
certainly.
All right, that's it for now.
Yeah. Administrator Krupp, do you have a?
I was just going to follow up with questions about what happens in the Damascus area now that the disincorporation is complete. And of course, we are just in the final few months of the transition that began in July of last year with the winding down of the use of Damascus resources to fund the staff that came over from the city team, and also the funding that was there to help maintain current law enforcement services through the course of this current year, which essentially goes away as of July 17th of this coming year. My sense of it, though, is with the outreach that our public and governmental affairs staff have done to date, there's still quite a bit of raw feelings and some significant difficulties and perspectives out there. In a lot of ways, I think the dust needs to settle a bit in the community before we're really prepared to kind of work through what next steps might look like. Our public and governmental affairs staff had a community meeting, I think a week and a half or so ago. Was kind of a challenging one for them. And one of the questions that we've been posing to the community is now that they no longer have a city council representing what was some 11,000 people and some 16 square miles of area. How and in what way should they be able to communicate and be represented when they work with county government? Is it a community planning organization, hamlet, village? What kind of framework ought to be out there? And I'm not sure that we're quite yet there with them knowing exactly what it is they'd like to be able to see in the way of how their own community continues to interact with the county. There may also be still some issues about perception, maybe misunderstandings, maybe not really being in the know as to what it really means in terms of the level of county service delivery now that they are unincorporated. So my sense of it is this is probably going to take at least another year or so of us kind of working with the community to kind of see things settle before we know that folks are prepared to talk about what a new direction might look like there.
Thanks. All right, Commissioner Savas.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for being here today, and ladies. Believe it or not, I don't have any financial questions this time. Shocker, huh? Well, mine are more service related. So I just want to get one clarification before I start, and that is we didn't lose really 4 FTE bodies. We actually just lost potentially really net 3 funding for net 3, right?
That's correct. So 3 were eliminated from the budget and 1 was transferred to the Enhanced Law Enforcement District.
But no one lost their job, and those people, because we have a shortage of
right.
staffing anyhow, so I'm
We
sure we
removed
didn't lay
3
anyone off.
vacant
Just wanna get-
positions.
just for those listening, I want to make sure we had that clarification. So one of the hottest things seemed to be, and by the way, you guys on the community action group doing the zombie homes and all the nuisance homes, fantastic work. I mean, it really is great police work, great community involvement. I applaud everyone involved in that. It's just absolutely wonderful. Get a lot of good feedback. Difficult situation, but a lot of good community feedback. So it is appreciated. But the largest issue I'm hearing so much about, and it seems to be mostly rural, and that is illegal activity, code enforcement violations, which is not really in your wheelhouse, but more of bad behavior, disorderly conduct, threatening stuff. It's basically non-marijuana related, really. They're not marijuana activities per se, but on property where marijuana operations are occurring. It's the people. It's not the marijuana activity itself. It's not the OLCC rules. It's not the Oregon Health OHA rules. It's just literally bad behavior. Walking on the property line, firing weapons in the air, aiming towards people, facing people, shouting at them, scaring animals and dogs, just a lot of bad behavior, running vehicles, and stirring up dirt, dust, the dogs. I mean, just literally being terrible neighbors. I mean, I'm sure that if you were to go to a home and there was a domestic violence dispute, and potentially one of the 2 parties there is behaving in a similar manner, you'd probably take them away or separate them, right? But it seems as though the response we're getting is they called the sheriff's department, and the sheriff's department does not want to be involved because it's a marijuana-related activity. But it's not really the activity per se that's marijuana-related I'm speaking to. It's the bad behavior of those folks doing things that are not marijuana-related, just happen to be on a marijuana-related facility or property. Can you speak to what we can, what would you message to our citizens, Sheriff, as far as the sheriff's we haven't really talked about it, so it is a burning service issue out there right now. I hear it, whether it's in Canby or Colton or on the mountain, it's everywhere.
Well, I guess first and foremost, I'd say that I think the community is somewhat divided on the marijuana issue. And so unfortunately, you kind of have folks that do not believe in marijuana, and somebody's putting up a grow next door, and it's causing a lot of frustration. They're calling me, they're calling Dawn, they're calling everybody, any kind of way that they can stop that process moving forward. Unfortunately, we can't. It was voted on by the people. They want it. And so we're a little bit in a difficult position. Do we enforce the laws? Yes. I mean, if there's a verbal argument that comes into dispatch, they screen it. CCOM does a wonderful job screening calls. If it looks like it's a potentially serious situation, they'll send somebody out there to try and calm it down. But we really, in many aspects, have our hands tied about what we can do. So, you know, it's unfortunate because I sense your frustration. It's my frustration too, because I really believe it has a big impact on our youth. And anecdotally, talking to schools, they have seen the use go up. We're talking about liquid tabs. We're talking about stuff that kids are getting more access to. And I am on the HIDA board, which is high intensity drug trafficking area, federally designated. They have actually dedicated a lot of money to research to really track what's happening in Oregon because other states are looking at us. So are our drug treatment admissions going up? Are dropout rates increasing? I would say it's too early to kind of tell on a lot of that. We can say anecdotally, you know, we're seeing these increases, but I think Oregon is really, this is going to see something that's very progressive. Talking to the, really the folks in the trenches on this whole marijuana issue, I can say they can make a lot more money if they ship it to the East Coast. We are just an export for the rest of the United States. And so, you know, that is one of the big issues that we're also seeing is that if you can make 10 times the amount in New York, why not? And that's really one of the big issues. So I just believe we're going to see a variety of things really confront local leaders such as yourself, law enforcement, and we're trying to be a part of that conversation. But we do have our hands tied to a major degree on this.
I'm not really talking about the industry per se. I'm just talking about the civil disobedience or civil behavior. I mean, the behavior issue. I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I would say as those calls are coming in, and I mean, CCOM screens those calls, and you know, we'll try and get somebody there. Depending, you know, I guess I'd have to know more specifics about the call. If they're just saying, hey, these two people are disagreeing over a minor issue, they might not send somebody out to that based on the other pending calls holding.
Are you guys seeing more of an increase of those kind of calls that are making it through dispatch to your offices?
Neighborhood complaints?
Neighborhood
I
complaints?
I haven't noticed that, but we haven't actually run the calls for service.
And our
But I've
patrol
not heard of
captain
that.
said he's not.
Okay. So the other issue, traffic deaths. Sheriff, last time you and I sat down for coffee, that's what we talked about. Focus was on I think in the at the time, seeing the stats we had then. It's a year later now. I don't know what the numbers are now for the next year report, but we were number 2 in the state as far as traffic deaths, and I think you cited in your presentation number quite recently, pretty high already, and we're only midway through the year. What prevention kind of measures do you see? I know that distracted driving is a huge issue. Now we have, you know, a new substance that's now legal to consume, marijuana, and drug issues and everything, but leading to car accidents. Any efforts, or are we making any progress in that, or are we still going to be number 1 or number 2 with Lane County in traffic deaths?
Well, I think that, you know, as we kind of talked about, we've been on kind of a maintenance level budget, trying to maintain what we currently have. We do have our traffic unit out there, but I will say that one of the big challenges, in fact, just today I was talking to one of our traffic units, congestion is a huge issue. the more congestion, the more likely to crashes. I'm going to talk about a traffic crash that just happened recently down near Kanema. It was a poor individual on a motorcycle. Traffic suddenly stops at Kanema. It's all congestion. Some lady comes over, whether the sun was in her eye or what, rear ends his motorcycle and breaks his neck and kills him instantly. Is there any preventive nature to that? You know, it didn't look like there was any fault on the driver, but I can contribute that, look, there's this heavy congestion. I can tell you on 205 and I-5, these major corridors, there are some major traffic issues that are really facing all of us. Will some enforcement and education help? Absolutely. I believe in education. I believe that putting people out there to step up enforcement can help. But I will say this county, Happy Valley and some of these other areas surrounding us are seeing tremendous growth. And unfortunately with it, I also believe comes traffic accidents.
That's all I have for now. Thank you.
Ed?
Just a couple of questions. On page 6, slide 11, it says, and I don't know who's going to answer this, city police services contracts, 6.8 mil. Is that based on last year's contract, or I understand you're negotiating with both cities right now? Is that, my understanding is it's going to be more money. You're going to ask for more money, so which figure is this?
So good question. So at the $6.8 million that's listed in there at the time that we had to present our proposed budget was our best estimate of what that amount would be. And it was based on the average of services over the last several fiscal years. So when we get to the point where we're going to negotiate contracts, which we currently are with those two cities, we have what we call a cost book, which I'm sure you're familiar with, that has several different factors varied into it. So cost of uniform, cost of salaries, which get updated annually. There are formulas based upon population and number of reports and what have you. So all that gets factored in to those contracts and they're updated annually. So the numbers stay fresh, but are based on consistent factors. So at this point in time, I think that we're close to that $6.8 million number. Some of the cities are considering what type of services they may want to include in their upcoming contract. So we don't have a solid number as of yet, but that's as close as we can get at this point in time.
Is there a percentage that you're going to ask over and above the 6.8?
No, so the percentage increase per city is based upon those factors that I described. On average, an increase for a city ranges between 4 to 8%. It depends again upon what they are wishing to include and their use of services in the prior year.
And I don't see the ELED is in this book, but the income from is not, unless I'm missing it, here.
The income is actually reflected in the patrol division, and it's about $7 million this year, just a little more than $7 million. And that covers what will be 35 deputies.
What, and how much was the increase for the ELED this year, percentage-wise?
That's a good question. Let me see if I can access that for you.
$4.25.
I'm sorry.
In stereo, one more time.
Go ahead, Nancy.
4.25%.
So that's reasonable to assume the cities are going to be up 4.25 too?
Yes and no. So again, the formulas are based upon those factors. So it's not just a straight translation from how much our revenue goes up to what the contracts look like. But what that 4.25% informs us is this is the amount of money that we have to provide services in that district. So that's how much money we have to spend on the salary and benefits for the year.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Eric, you're next.
Okay, I'm just kind of going through the slides here a little bit, and I'm going through the financial information. Can you hear me okay now? One of the questions in, if I look at slide on page 4, slide number 7, you treat the inmates with severe mental illness in the jail there. You have a program that does that. How many of those severe mental illness inmates do you have in the jail?
Like, how many severely mentally ill people do we have at any given time? Or over the course of a year, or I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's fine, over the course of a year or at any one time.
I don't have a percentage for you. I can tell you it's a significant number, and the question is, what do you consider a serious mental illness? Is it somebody who's diagnosed with a serious and persistent mental illness? The number is, on the lower end. If you're talking about people who are exhibiting signs of mental illness, the number is quite high. And so it depends on which definition we're using, but I don't have an exact percentage for you. But it's a significant number of people.
What's your criteria for the START program then, for those people in the START program?
So those are people who are exhibiting signs that they're going to need some extra assistance to either manage their stay in our custody or they need help developing a plan when they're out. So that, in other words, they don't have a home, they don't have wraparound services already in place, that sort of thing. So it's people, we're basing it on behavior that we're observing. And so those are people who need an extra level of service.
Okay, and when you transition them out of the jail, where do they go from there?
Well, it depends. There's a variety of places. We have the transition center where they can start to get services. Hopefully, it depends on the plan that was developed. It might be into a group home. It might be going into a community corrections house the community corrections has for stabilization for people with mental illness. It depends on their legal status and it depends on their mental health needs. It could be a variety of places.
Well, what I'm getting at is that a lot of people, a lot of these perpetrators of mass killings and shootings and all that stuff already had mental illness, and they were being shuffled and ignored for many times by many different agencies and departments and people, including schools. And yet, when the time came, they created this severe issue. And what I'm saying is, if you have people in your custody that have severe mental illness, are we just transitioning them out because we don't have any else place to put them? Or are they going into a continual observation program or care program? Or are we just releasing them back into the population to later explode and become another headline on the paper?
So there's not one answer for that question. We transition people, it depends on their legal status, their mental health status, what services they're eligible for, whether they have, they're eligible for the Oregon Health Plan. We try to connect them with behavioral health. The behavioral health staff is in those meetings. And so might connect them with services at Centerstone. They may go to a hospital because their level of need is so acute. We sometimes actually just transport directly from the jail to an inpatient bed in the hospital. It depends. A lot of the people that are coming into our jail are there for low-level offenses. So it's low criminality, high mental illness, and so they're going to be getting out of jail regardless. We don't have any authority to hold a person in jail, and frankly it's not good for them to hold them in jail when they have severe mental health needs. So we're talking about people on disorderly conduct, criminal trespass, those kinds of things. Being in the jail isn't the best place for them. Being in a community treatment program is. And so we're evaluating them. Our staff is making their best expert opinion, looking at the resources available and trying to fit them into the best place to prevent any of those kinds of situations and ultimately to prevent them from coming back to jail, because that's our goal.
And Eric, just to follow up, one of the things that we really believe in is, once again, is pulling all the stakeholders together to come up with the best comprehensive plan. Because I think if you look historically, was one individual trying to make the best plan. Lee's really brought this program forward to make sure we're all around the table to provide best wraparound services for that particular individual. And Chris is right. I mean, a lot of times I'll have somebody that is a low-level theft too, who has failed to appear multiple times and has been arrested multiple times, is never going to get another day in jail for her crime. Yet she can't make the court appearance. And it's impacting the judicial system, us, and is absolutely wrong way to do business. And so those are the types of folks who we're really trying to address and kind of help them through the process. And it is with community corrections and the jail really kind of working hand in hand. Good question, though.
Okay, thank you. let's see. Okay, so on your, I'm looking at slide 23 on page 12, where you talk about past PLP funding results. And you hired a sergeant, was added to a safe place in the Family Justice Center.
Yes.
I'm looking at what you've written as far as his activities. And my question is, do you really need to have a sergeant to read domestic violence reports or assign a case for follow-up or take corrective action on report deficiencies? I mean, does it require that level of expertise and that level of personnel?
Yeah, the reason that, and Angie can talk about that more specifically, but we've had conversations about this, is that sergeant is taking a look at really a lethality assessment of how high risk this individual is to really take the life of his spouse or partner. And so making sure that we're putting all the kind of resources appropriately into it, making sure there's immediate follow-up. What's really a big challenge is there's a high lethality on strangulation cases, making sure that we're getting people out there and really managing that very closely, because it is a very high-risk unit. And that's where I will come back and say it's just because of their actions. They have actually intervened in cases that were life-saving, truly life-saving. And she could talk more about that, but I know due to the high risk and lethality assessments that having somebody really having direct oversight that is very important.
And I think the other thing that's key to remember is the last line in that, it's the sergeant also carries a full investigative case. So they're not just reviewing reports, they're actually out investigating cases. They're also doing things like providing security at the facility. They're helping with policy development. They're doing a whole lot of things. These are just sort of the highlights.
Okay, all right. And then the last question I have has to do with
Is
numbers.
the sergeant the only uniformed personnel in that building?
No.
The deputy up there too, the deputy up there.
Okay, I'm looking at on page 33 in the budget, which is the summary of revenues and expenses. And being an accountant, I'm not real hung up on budget-to-budget comparisons. What I'm more hung up on is actual to budget. And so I'm looking at the FY 16-17 projected year-end numbers. I don't know if have you got that before you?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, well, you can see that you've got revenue there of $85.3 million, operating revenue, and a proposed budget of $89.3 million. That's a $4.1 million increase between actual and budgeted. You see that? Are you following me?
I'm not seeing those particular numbers, no.
85.3, it's in blue. On the revenue, operating revenue.
So about mid-page in dark blue, 85,262 is what you mean, right?
Oh, okay, I see that one.
And if I may, again, that revenue number does not include the beginning fund balance. So if you were to factor in the 2.6 million at the top of the column,
Uh-huh.
we would
You'd be down only about 1.4, right? Or there would be a 1.4%, a $1.4 million increase, right? Between that and budget? The reason I ignored the beginning fund balances is because they're roughly the same. You got 2.6 million in 16-17 and 2.8 million for a proposed budget in 17-18. So it's roughly a wash.
right.
So I'm looking at just the back of the napkin calculation of $85.3 million in revenue, actual or projected, and $89.3 million projected or budgeted for 17-18. So that's roughly $4 million somewhere in there, plus or minus.
Correct.
Okay, and then I go down to the expenditure portion, and I see 85, oh, wait a minute, let's go down to total expenditures, which is below the reserve and future expenditures and the contingency. It's it's highlighted in black. You got $85 million in total expenditures projected and 92.1 million in budget. And that's an increase of $7 million. So I'm looking at the difference between 4 million and 7 million, and that's roughly $3 million. And my question is, how are you making that up? Where's that coming from?
Right, so again, if I'm understanding your question, that would be the carryover amount. So we have 2.7 million roughly, which if you look at the 89 million, add the 2.7 million, that should equal the 92.1 million. So we should have a balanced budget before you for
Okay,
17,
so you're saying the beginning fund balance then budgeted would roughly cover that $2.9 million?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Correct.
Okay. Well, that was the only question I had. Sorry to put everybody through a mental gymnastics here.
It was a good question.
That's fine, thank you. I think Wilda's next and then Ed.
Thank you. I just have a couple of what I hope will be quick questions. And the quickest, in fact, is I've had a couple of folks point out to me about our wonderful, great new fallen officer memorial. So I just think it's important that folks realize that that did not come from tax money. It did not come from general fund money. It came from pure sponsorship and contributions and whatever. So if you want to speak real quickly about that, and then I have another one that may take a little bit more.
First, thanks, Nelda, for bringing that up. And yes, that it was, the work was donated. All the funds are contributed by business leaders and citizens, really stepped up. And so we did not use any county resources on that project whatsoever. And I just have to say there were just some amazing people that stepped up and made huge financial contributions to make it happen. One individual at the end donated $100,000 to kind of help us get us over the hump.
Well, including the fact that the sculptor, who is world known or renowned, donated his services. So we paid only for, or it was paid only for the actual structures that they ended up with. And ultimately, there will be two bronze cast honor guards at that memorial, none of which is paid for by tax money.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just wanted to be sure folks knew and understood that it was a tremendous county-wide, in fact, larger than that, activity. So since there had been a couple of questions to me. The other thing I've had questions about, both from a couple of citizens at large as well as a couple of folks that are involved with the school district, in this case it happens to be North Clackamas School District, but there are others, is the school resource officers. There was a point in time when that program began, I think it was back in around 2000, when the sheriff's office provided SROs, school resource officers, to several of the high schools and perhaps even the middle schools. I'm not sure about that. And then because of funding needs, those were curtailed. Meanwhile, the school tried to kind of fill in, or the schools tried to kind of fill in. Then a levy was passed in 2006, the public safety levy. So there's still remains question about why weren't the SROs, brought back to the school districts then at the same level they had been before. In other words, for the sheriff's office, paying for those officers. And it's my understanding that it's somewhere around $115,000 per officer that's at the schools. I think there's maybe 4 schools that they provide service to right now. So could you speak to all of that and how that happened to come about and what the future holds for that?
Yeah, I think that just looking back at history, my recollection of this, I mean, years and years ago, I think there was somebody at some point in time that was paid by the sheriff's office to be an SR in the schools. And then I think there came a point in time where we had levy failures, where we actually laid people off. It was a pretty dramatic impact for the county. So they eliminated just about every little extra position. And really since that time, actually in the 2006, you might recall that in 2006, when we actually went out for the public safety levy, we were second lowest in the entire state for jail beds per capita. And if we were looking at, we already had 85 closed jail beds. We were looking at closing an additional, I believe, 50 some, which would have put us lowest in the entire state. So our crisis at that time was fund staff to keep those jail beds open, try and open some more, and then step up. You might remember that our big effort at that particular time was a huge meth crisis that we were trying to deal with. So to step up the effort on that. I know that financially some of the schools have wanted to hire some SROs or contract with us, and we've actually even formally worked with Estacada where we picked up some of it. We've tried to help in any way that we possibly can. There are a tremendous amount of other schools that also, I think, Malino and Colton and the other ones that would love that, and I think that really in our I would say maintenance level budget, we just don't have the resources to do that. If the schools want to help step up, we'd be more than happy to kind of try and fill that position, but that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, I know in some instances, in some of the cities with the high schools that have cities, the high schools that are within a city, their local police department covers that need. And school officials have indicated how absolutely important that is to have school resource officers who are uniformed officers that are within the school district. It's a huge deterrent to bad behaviors, I guess you would say. So kind of along with that, we heard a little earlier about the threat of harm assessments in the schools that are going on, that Health and Human Services is working with the Sheriff's Office on that. And in their budget line item, I think it was $43,000 that they were putting into that program. And so with my questions about the SROs on my mind, I also wondered about that. What is their financial buy-in from the Sheriff's Office in that, and/or do the SROs contribute to that program? I mean, are they working with the schools and with H3S on that? I don't know that much about the program, so it's a total, I'm an uninformed kind of question asking you.
Sure. Great question. First, just to let you know that I'm on the chair of the statewide Safe Schools Task Force. And so one of the big issues that a couple elements we're trying to create statewide initiative is Safe Oregon, which is a website, a text tip line where kids can report situations, which we have already had that come forward in our county. And then basically the second phase of that is making sure that there's an appropriate threat assessment team that comes together to figure out the best safety plan for moving forward. And so as I mentioned, Christina McMahon has really stepped up. One of the things that Rich Swift, Christina McMahon, and myself, is trying to get somebody embedded, not just in the schools, but in the ESD, because there are so many schools in our county that we're trying to deal with. And that person really be a liaison between Rich's office, my office, juvenile, and when we do have those situations come up, that they are bringing the right people together and are plugged in right to all the schools. So it is, I will tell you, it is a big lift by everybody, and we recently met with the ESD about trying to move forward on this effort. And so it's really important to us, more so I believe that, and Rich can comment on this, as so is Christina McMahon, is youth suicide in our state is absolutely out of control.
Oh, yeah.
And so we have to have avenues where people aren't suffering in silence, that they can reach out. Our goal is to have that text tip line on the back of every student ID card so that they feel like there is somebody they can reach out to, because a lot of times they are suffering in silence. And so by having somebody embedded in the school districts, the ESD, we think that's kind of the best avenue. So I agree that all those are important. I think looking at us is trying to, what can we actually fund? And I think our initial plan was Rich Swift, Christina McMahon, and myself, we were all going to chip in money to make it happen. And along the line, she found some money and said she could do it. So
Yeah, because 43,000 didn't seem like, an amount that could really, quite frankly, go very far. So I thought, well, there's got to be other partners in there. And so obviously SO was a natural, so, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ed, you're next.
I would have asked this before, but I wanted to give Eric a chance to ask his questions. He gets kind of impatient. Anyway, on the back of what Wilda said, I didn't really appreciate how important a school resource officer was until I lived in Colton. I mean, we had 3 school resource officers, I believe, before the levy failed. We had one in Clackamas, Putnam, and I think Estacada. And then I think there was one in Wilsonville, but I didn't concern myself with that. But I can't begin to tell you the impact a school resource officer has in the small area of Colton. Everybody knew that person's name. Everybody knew that he was there. It doesn't matter he or she, but it was he. And everybody appreciated that he was there because not only would he be at the school, he would patrol around. He did a great job. He really did. And it was just the fact that he was there with the patrol car more than anything. The log trucks slowed down. They don't go slow anymore. So they have a huge impact on a small city like that or a small little town like that. It's very disturbing to many people, not just me, I don't have many kids in school, that they have decided to not fund the school resource officer anymore and gone to unarmed security. And it's disturbing to me too, for many of the reasons that you just said, Sheriff, that we don't have a school resource officer. I think the other thing is, and maybe I'm talking apples and oranges, but don't we contribute from the general fund $4 million or so for the transition center? Is that my, I mean, isn't there money from the general fund going to the transition center?
Yes, I don't believe so.
No,
Yeah.
no. Anyway, I'm misinformed on that. But anyway, I can't think of a better place to put a deputy than at Colton, Clackamas, Estacada Sandy now, and Putnam. For many of the reasons you just said, the teenage suicide is up, all of that is up, plus the impact it has. I'm just, I'm surprised that we don't have one in every school. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Eric, did you have some more follow-up questions to our?
I do.
Okay.
One of the things that really disturbed me.
The mic.
Mike.
Yes, I do. One of the things that really disturbed me was when you were reading through the statistics of the number of deaths and traffic fatalities and issues and things like that. And I'm going back to the performance Clackamas goals, and I'm wondering, we seem to be going in the wrong direction. We're not reducing the number of fatalities on the highway and things like that. And I'm wondering because, I live next to Sunnyside, up there about 132nd. And about 2 or 3 in the morning, it's like the Indy 500. And I'm wondering, is there any way you can, because I also looked at the spreadsheet that you gave us earlier that showed that there's a gap in coverage in about that area in terms of patrol officers or deputies on staff. And I'm thinking, how do you stop that if you don't put somebody out there to start issuing and writing tickets, even though it's early in the morning? And as a result of that, put the word out on the street that you can't use it as a racetrack so that we reduce the number of fatalities. I think there's been not a fatality on Sunnyside, but there've been several accidents.
Yeah, I mean, I think each and every one of you, I think, bring up some valid points that if I had the magic wand to say, hey, I'd put an SRO in every school, I can tell you on the statewide Safe Schools Task Force, there's over 500,000 kids in our school districts in Oregon. And the majority of the schools, without a shadow of a doubt, do not have an SRO. There's a zillion charter schools, and so part of which is trying to figure out with the finances and resources provided to everybody is that to triage those cases in the best way. On the traffic side, I can tell you that we do look at the statistics of where the crashes are, deploy resources, where accidents are, where there are fatalities to try and do the prevention up front. But once again, what I tried to paint a picture to you is the calls for service and the self-initiated activities. I'm telling you what, if a patrol deputy does a traffic stop and takes a drunk driver off the streets, he's gone for about 4 hours. There's nobody in that district. That district, if it's from Boring to the Mountain, there's nobody around. And so that's why we also wanted to point out the resources and how we deploy staff. And just imagine pulling one of those out of the system for somebody going to jail. So I think that, we have had really a tough several years of kind of down economy. I feel like, we are in that maintenance level budget. We're trying to deploy the resources in the very best way. Captain Rhodes is constantly meeting with his folks, looking at modifying it any way that we can. He's actually moved to get more people on nights and off of days. Because the calls for service are going up. So we constantly really try and look at the deployment of resource and what is, the best deterrent, what are the best calls for service, how we can reduce calls for service, and really constantly look at that. But my goal, just to tell you my personal opinion, I feel like I would love to have SROs in the middle schools. I feel like the middle schools are where we should be intervening. The high schools are more attention to drugs and other issues that are going on, but I feel like the younger kids are not being cared for. They're exposed to different situations that I would love to see at an earlier intervention, but unfortunately right now, the resources do not give us that ability.
Thank you. One final question or comment from Commission Chair Bernard, then I'd like to segue then into the community corrections presentation.
I had one more other.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Thought we did community corrections.
We saved it for you.
Well, we're good with it, so go ahead. I just want to say, as far as traffic fatalities nationwide, they're way up. And it's distracted driving. I don't care how many police officers you put out on the road. You're not going to keep somebody. And if every day I drive, I can look over and see someone on their cell phone, texting, playing video games, all kinds of things. But I want to say that the SRO thing, we were at Clackamas High School last night. They had an SRO. He's there. I forget his name. I read his name tag. In the city of Milwaukee at one point, we helped fund Milwaukee High School SRO out of city council money.
It's paid for totally by our police department.
Yeah, that's how we did it. And I imagine Happy Valley's paying for some of that. But I don't disagree. I think an SRO in the school, if there's some way we can find a way, we ought to look towards doing that, especially out in the rural communities. But anyway, that's all I have to say.
Commissioner Savas.
Just to follow up, so I just wanted clarification. If someone spots, and patrol spots someone who's maybe driving erratically, suspected of maybe being a DUI, we're not going to act on it because it takes 4 hours, or we are going to act on it?
We'll act on it.
We'll act on it.
Oh, yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, that's my concern, is that I'm going from last budget cycle and the budget cycle before, discussions along the lines of, is that the incidents are up, but the drunk driving arrests are down. And it was somewhat of an issue or a puzzlement as to why that is. So if the rates of accidents are up, but the rates of arrest for drunk driving or distracted driving are going down, it's not, they don't seem to be hand in hand.
Yeah, I haven't seen that data. I don't know if that's something that you can.
Our traffic deaths are up.
Yeah,
So
would you-
that's clear. I mean, I think that's the data that I shared with Sheriff Roberts last year at this time. We had coffee.
Driving though.
Well, we don't know all those causes for all those deaths, but you just cited today, I don't know what the causes are of those accidents, but in your introduction, you cited, there's already significant traffic accidents already, and we're not even halfway through the year yet.
Yeah, and I think that, there's several compelling factors I will just say. For example, I'm going to bring it back to the marijuana issue, is right now is there is no real super adequate way to test somebody under the influence regarding marijuana. So we have DREs drug recognition experts. We have some of them throughout the organizations. It's an intense training where they run you through a whole series of tests, right? But that can be a very few for the entire patrol. And you have to test them really quickly because if they've smoked it, it dissipates at a high rate. Can't hardly get anybody to the hospital to even get any kind of samples because it dissipates so quickly. The crime lab came in and did a presentation on it and basically was telling us, makes it very difficult to put together a case because in our large geographic county, to get somebody to the scene, there's been a crash, they're sticking around. By the time we drive and get there, then we give them the test or we get a DRE there. All that takes time, and the dissipation rate of marijuana can be a lot faster unless it's an edible where they ate it. So that's one of the other challenges of having the evidence to kind of move forward on some of those cases.
I guess the part I'm just struggling with is that, Washington County has a population higher than ours. They have congestion just as bad as ours. Multnomah County as well. Lane County was #1 last year in traffic deaths. Clackamas County is #2. Lane County commissioners say, well, we realize that it's unfortunate, but we had to cut our sheriffs back, our funding tremendously. So they had to cut a lot of staff. We haven't really made that cut, but yet we are oddly at #2. So I'm just trying to get to the bottom, or prevention, on the prevention side. How do we stop that? I mean, that's a bad number for us, and we are in a metropolitan area with 3 counties, and we seem to be the one that stands out a little bit. So I'm hoping that's not going to be realized in this year as well.
Yeah. I mean, my only comment is there is money from Justice Court that also goes to Patty McMillan's program, to help educate and reduce. I mean, that's another avenue that she's out there working on that front as well.
Okay, so where would you like to see the number, preferably for Clackamas County?
I mean, it should be our goal to have 0 fatalities.
It's our goal as well in traffic.
I think that, one
Or
is
in DTD.
obviously far too many. But realistically, I'm going to bring it back to Chair Bernard, is just that unfortunately, we are going to have people that are distracted driving, and that does cause fatalities and crashes. And as he said, you can look over, and the majority of people are texting or putting makeup on or doing something. They should just be focused on driving.
Are citations up for distracted driving? Do you guys track that at all? For just distracted, do we track that?
We can get that for you, yeah.
Please, I'd like to see that. Maybe for the last 2 years, maybe?
Another comment, Eric? Yeah, final comment.
Yeah, I was just gonna point out that, if you look in the statistics of the city or the county's comprehensive annual financial report, there are statistics in there for the last 10 fiscal years. And in the area of public protection and safety, for the sheriff, driving under the influence, in 2013, it was 614. In 2014, it's 446. In 2015, it's 556. And in 2016, it's 588. And I would venture to say we've had more than a percentage increase in traffic on our highways as opposed to the percentage increase in those particular statistics. Same thing with traffic citations. 2013 was 15,973. 2014 went down to 12,475. In 2015, it went down again to 12,166. And in 2016 is the only year it went up to 13,606. So as you build your MFR, be looking at those statistics, because that's what we're going to be looking at in terms of performance. Because the question that the citizens are continually asking, based on the size of your budget, what are we getting for the money we're spending?